Have you noticed that your legs feel heavier at the end of the day than they used to? That subtle tightness in the calves. The way your shoes seem to fit differently by evening. The sensation that simply standing for a while leaves you feeling drained in a way it never did before. These small experiences are so common that most people accept them as inevitable, just another part of growing older. But what if they are not inevitable at all? What if they are simply messages from a system that is working differently than it once did? Asking for something it has always needed but is no longer receiving. There is a mechanism within your legs that has been operating since your first step. A second heart that pumps blood back toward your chest against the pull of gravity. And like any system, it requires attention. The question is whether we have been giving it what it needs, or whether we have simply forgotten that it is there. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The quiet work of staying alive. Understanding circulation and longevity in the second half of life. There is a question that arises quietly, often in the early morning or late evening. When the body makes its presence known through small signals, a heaviness in the legs after a day of ordinary activity, a tightness in the calves upon rising, a subtle swelling around the ankles that was not there in younger years. The question is simple but persistent. Is this normal? And beneath it lies another, deeper inquiry. What can be done about it? For those who have crossed the threshold of 50, the body's systems begin to reveal themselves in ways they did not before. They become more visible, more tangible, less automatic. The circulatory system, in particular, begins to demand attention, not through dramatic events, necessarily, but through the accumulation of small experiences that suggest something has changed. The legs feel heavier at the end of the day. Walking uphill requires more effort than it once did. The feet, toward evening, seem to have outgrown the shoes that fit perfectly in the morning. These experiences are not merely inconveniences. They are messages from a system that is working differently than it did decades earlier. And like all messages, they deserve to be understood. The body's second heart. To understand what happens to circulation with age, it is helpful to first understand how circulation works when it is functioning well. Most people imagine the heart as the sole engine of blood flow, a powerful pump that pushes blood through arteries to every corner of the body. This is true, but it is only half the story. The heart pushes blood out, but it cannot pull it back. The return journey. The venous blood making its way from the feet back to the chest operates under different rules. The veins that carry blood back to the heart are low-pressure vessels. They lack the thick muscular walls of arteries. Instead, they rely on a different mechanism entirely, one that has nothing to do with the heart itself. Deep within the legs, particularly in the calves, the veins are surrounded by muscles. When these muscles contract, they squeeze the veins, pushing blood upward. When the muscles relax, the veins refill. This is the muscle pump, often called the body's second heart, and it is responsible for the majority of venous return from the lower extremities. The system is elegantly simple, but it has one critical requirement. The muscles must move. They must contract and relax repeatedly to create the pumping action. When they remain still for extended periods, the pump stops working. Blood pools in the lower legs. Fluid begins to leak from the capillaries into the surrounding tissues. The legs swell, feel heavy, and become more difficult to move. This creates a cycle. The legs feel heavy, so movement decreases, which causes more pooling, which makes the legs feel heavier still. What is remarkable about this system is not that it can fail, but that it works at all, given the forces working against it. The blood returning from the feet must travel upward against gravity, through a series of one-way valves that open and close with each muscle contraction. These valves are remarkably durable, but they are not indestructible. Over decades, some may weaken, some may leak. When they do, blood flows backward between contractions, and the efficiency of the pump declines. This is why circulatory changes often become noticeable in the second half of life. The system has been working continuously for 50, 60, 70 years. It has moved blood through the legs millions of times. Some wear is inevitable, but the degree of wear, and the body's ability to compensate for it, is not fixed. It is influenced by how the system is used. The intelligence of movement. There is a tendency to think of exercise as something one does for fitness, a separate activity, distinct from the rest of life, performed in specific places at specific times. This is a useful framework for some purposes, but it misses something essential about the relationship between movement and circulation. The muscle pump does not care whether movement occurs in a gym or a living room, whether it is called exercise or simply called living. It responds to muscle contraction, regardless of context. This distinction matters because it opens possibilities that might otherwise remain closed. For those who cannot walk long distances, who have arthritis that makes standing painful, who tire easily or fear falling, the idea of improving circulation through exercise can seem out of reach. But the muscle pump does not require walking. It does not require distance or duration. It requires only that muscles contract and relax, repeatedly, throughout the day. This is the intelligence of movement, not movement as performance, but movement as maintenance. The small motions, the brief contractions, the moments of activation that occur dozens of times throughout an ordinary day, all contribute to the pumping action that keeps blood moving. The challenge is not to find time for exercise, but to recognize that movement itself, in any form, is medicine for the circulatory system. The seated foundation, for many in the second half of life. The chair is not merely furniture, but a base of operations. It is where meals are eaten, where television is watched, where conversations occur, where rest is taken. The chair can be a place of stillness, but it can also be a place of subtle, continuous activity. Consider the simple act of lifting the heels while sitting. The feet rest flat on the floor, the knees bent at a comfortable angle, and then the heels rise just an inch, just enough to feel the calves engage. Hold for a moment, then lower. This movement, repeated 10 or 15 times, activates the soleus muscle, a deep calf muscle that is particularly rich in veins. Each contraction squeezes these veins, pushing blood upward. Each relaxation allows them to refill. The pump works, even while the body remains seated. This is not exercise in the conventional sense. It requires no special clothing, no equipment, no change of location. It can be performed while reading, while talking, while watching a program. It can be done in the morning with coffee, in the afternoon during a phone call, in the evening while unwinding. And because it can be done so easily, it can be done frequently, and frequency is what matters most for the muscle pump. The seated heel lift can be varied in countless ways. Lifting both heels together works both calves simultaneously. Lifting one heel at a time allows each leg to be focused on individually. Leaning forward slightly and resting the forearms on the thighs adds resistance, increasing the workload on the muscles and therefore increasing the pumping action. The movement can be fast or slow, sustained or intermittent. What matters is not the specific form but the repetition, the ongoing cycle of contraction and relaxation that keeps blood moving. Elevation as assistance. There is another principle that works alongside muscle contraction to support venous return, and it is so simple that it is often overlooked. Gravity, which works against circulation when the legs are down, can be made to work for circulation when the legs are up. When the feet are elevated above the level of the heart, blood drains from the legs more readily. The veins empty partially. Venous pressure decreases, and fluid that has leaked into the tissues begins to be reabsorbed. This is why elevation is often recommended for swelling. It provides a direct mechanical assist to the circulatory system. But elevation alone is less effective than elevation combined with movement. When the legs are elevated and the ankles are moved, pointing and flexing the feet in a rhythmic pumping motion, the muscle pump and gravity work together. The elevated position reduces the work the muscles must do against gravity, while the muscle contraction actively propels blood through the veins. The combination is more powerful than either approach alone. This can be done in bed, in a recliner, or in any chair that allows the feet to be propped higher than the hips. A footstool, another chair, or a stack of pillows can create the necessary elevation. The legs should be comfortable, supported, and relaxed. Then, simply point the toes away from the body, feeling the calves engage, and flex them back toward the body. This motion, repeated for several minutes, creates a gentle but effective pumping action that moves blood out of the lower legs. The beauty of this approach is its accessibility. It requires no strength, no balance, no stamina. It can be done by anyone who can sit comfortably and move their ankles. And it can be done for as long as desired, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, throughout a television program. The body receives the benefit of both gravity and muscle activity, working in concert to support circulation. The standing dimension, when standing is possible and comfortable, it offers additional opportunities for circulatory support. The standing position changes the dynamics of muscle activation, engaging different muscles and increasing the workload on those that are used. The standing heel raise is a natural progression from the seated version, standing behind a sturdy chair or at a counter, with hands resting lightly for balance. The heels lift and lower in a continuous rhythm. The full weight of the body becomes the resistance, increasing the force of muscle contraction and therefore increasing the pumping action. The gastrocnemius, the larger calf muscle that is most active when the knee is straight, becomes the primary mover. This movement can be performed in short bursts throughout the day, while waiting for water to boil, while on the telephone, while standing at a window looking out at the yard. These moments can become opportunities for circulatory support. 10 repetitions here, 10 there, accumulated across a day, provide more benefit than a single longer session because they repeatedly activate the pump rather than allowing blood to pool between efforts. For those with good balance, the movement can be performed on one leg at a time, doubling the load and increasing the demand on the muscles. But balance should never be sacrificed for intensity. The hands should remain on the support. The feet should be positioned securely, and the movement should be controlled. The goal is not challenge, but consistency. The comprehensive squat. There is a movement that engages nearly every muscle in the legs, that activates the pump throughout the entire lower extremity, that mimics a pattern humans have performed for millennia, but that modern life has largely eliminated. That movement is the squat. The squat, in its full form, involves bending the hips and knees to lower the body toward the ground, then rising back to standing. It engages the calves, the thighs, the buttocks, all the large muscle groups of the legs. Each of these muscles, when it contracts, compresses the veins in its region, pushing blood upward. A single squat activates the pump at multiple levels simultaneously. But the squat does not need to be deep to be effective. For those with knee concerns or mobility limitations, a shallow squat, lowering just a few inches, still engages the muscles sufficiently to create venous compression. The key is the combination of hip and knee movement. If the hips move back and the knees bend, the muscles work. If the movement is done correctly, the thighs contract to control the descent and then contract again to power the rise. Each contraction contributes to the pumping action. The squat can be performed while holding a support, just as with the standing heel raise. The hands rest on a counter or chair back, providing stability and confidence. The movement is slow and controlled, with attention to maintaining balance. 10 to 15 repetitions can be performed in a minute or two, and then the body returns to its regular activities. Like the other movements, the squat is most effective when distributed throughout the day. A few squats before sitting down to a meal, a few after rising from a chair, a few during a pause in daily activities. These small doses accumulate into significant circulatory support. The principle of frequency. There is a common misunderstanding about exercise and circulation that deserves careful examination. Many people believe that if they walk for 30 minutes each day, they have done enough to support their circulatory health. This belief is understandable but incomplete. Walking for 30 minutes is valuable, but it does not address the other 23.5 hours of the day. The muscle pump operates on moments, not hours. It responds to each contraction, each activation, each brief engagement. When the muscles are still, the pump is still. Blood pools, fluid accumulates, the system stagnates. Then, during the walking period, the pump activates and clears some of what has accumulated. But by the next morning, the cycle begins again. This is why frequency matters more than duration. 10 brief activations spread throughout the day are more effective for venous return than one longer session, because they prevent pooling rather than simply correcting it after it has occurred. The goal is to keep the pump operating regularly, to prevent stagnation from establishing itself in the first place. This principle transforms how movement is understood. It is no longer about finding time for exercise, but about recognizing opportunities for movement that already exist in every day. The moments of standing, of shifting position, of adjusting in a chair, these can all become opportunities for deliberate activation. The heel lifts while waiting, the ankle pumps while sitting, the squats before sitting down. These small acts, repeated consistently, create a different relationship between the body and gravity. The tissue connection. There is another dimension to circulation that becomes increasingly relevant with age, and it involves not the blood vessels themselves, but the tissues that surround them. Muscles that are used regularly are not only stronger, but also more vascular. They contain more capillaries, more small blood vessels, more pathways for blood to travel. This is adaptation at the tissue level. The body's response to demand. When muscles contract repeatedly, they signal to the body that more blood supply is needed. The body responds by creating more capillaries, increasing the density of the vascular network within the muscle. This means that blood has more pathways to follow, more routes for delivery and return. The system becomes more robust, more redundant, more capable of handling variations in demand. This adaptation occurs slowly, over weeks and months of consistent use. It is not visible from the outside, but it is profoundly real. The muscle that has been regularly activated is different at the microscopic level from the muscle that has been still. It is better supplied, better drained, better maintained. It ages differently. This is one reason why movement matters even when it seems to accomplish nothing visible. The changes are occurring beneath the surface, in the architecture of the tissue itself. Each contraction contributes to this adaptation, signaling to the body that this muscle is needed, that its blood supply should be maintained, that its vascular network should be preserved. The question of swelling. Swelling in the lower legs is one of the most common circulatory concerns among older adults, and it is also one of the most misunderstood. Many people assume that swelling is simply a cosmetic issue or a minor inconvenience. In truth, it is a signal that the circulatory system is struggling to keep up with demand. Swelling occurs when fluid leaks from the capillaries into the surrounding tissues faster than it can be reabsorbed. This happens when venous pressure is elevated, when blood is not being returned to the heart efficiently, when it pools in the lower legs, when the veins become congested. The fluid that leaks out is normally reabsorbed by the lymphatic system. But when the leakage exceeds the absorption capacity, the fluid accumulates. The legs swell. This is not merely uncomfortable. Swollen tissues are less elastic, less mobile, more prone to injury. The skin becomes tighter, more fragile. The weight of the legs increases, making movement more difficult. And the presence of swelling indicates that the circulatory system is under stress, working at the edge of its capacity. The movements described earlier address swelling at its source. By activating the muscle pump, they reduce venous pressure. By improving venous return, they decrease the amount of fluid leaking from the capillaries. And by encouraging lymphatic drainage, the muscle pump also moves lymph, the fluid that collects in tissues. They help clear the fluid that has already accumulated. The relationship between movement and swelling is not mysterious. It is mechanical. Muscles contract, veins compress, blood moves, pressure drops, fluid reabsorbs. The process is as reliable as gravity itself, but it requires the muscles to contract, and that requires intention. The rhythm of daily life. There is a way of moving through daily life that supports circulation without demanding attention. It is not a program or a regimen. It is simply a rhythm, a pattern of small movements woven into the fabric of ordinary activities. In this rhythm, rising from a chair is not merely rising. It is an opportunity to pause at the top, to stand fully erect, to feel the legs support the body's weight. Walking to the kitchen is not merely walking. It is an opportunity to feel the feet contact the floor. The calves engage with each step. The rhythm of contraction and relaxation that walking naturally provides. Sitting down is not merely sitting. It is an opportunity to perform a few heel lifts before the body settles, to keep the pump active even as rest begins. This rhythm does not require discipline in the conventional sense. It requires only awareness, the recognition that every moment offers an opportunity for movement, that the body is always ready to respond to intention, that the small choices made hundreds of times each day accumulate into significant effects. The person who lives in this rhythm does not think of themselves as exercising. They think of themselves as living, and their living includes movement. They stand while on the telephone, not because standing is exercise, but because standing is comfortable. They lift their heels while watching television, not because heel lifts are prescribed, but because the movement feels natural. They squat to pick something up from a low shelf, not because squats are beneficial, but because squatting is how humans have always picked things up. This is the paradox at the heart of circulatory health. The most effective approaches are often the ones that feel least like interventions. They blend into life so thoroughly that they become invisible. And because they are invisible, they are sustainable. They do not require motivation or willpower. They simply become part of how the day unfolds. The cumulative effect. There is a temptation to evaluate health practices by their immediate effects. If swelling does not disappear after a week of heel lifts, if the legs do not feel lighter after a month of ankle pumps, it is easy to conclude that the practices are not working. This conclusion misunderstands how the body changes. The effects of consistent movement are cumulative. They build slowly, invisibly, beneath the surface. The vascular network expands one capillary at a time. The muscle pump becomes more efficient one contraction at a time. The venous valves are supported one cycle at a time. These changes are not visible on any given day, but over months and years they are profound. The person who has moved consistently for years has a different circulatory system than the person who has been still. Their veins are more elastic, their muscles more vascular, their valves more competent. Their legs are lighter not because they are thinner, but because their tissues are better maintained. Their swelling is less not because they are lucky, but because their pump works better. This is the gift of consistency. It does not promise immediate transformation. It promises gradual improvement, steady maintenance, the preservation of function over time. And for those in the second half of life, preservation of function is perhaps the most valuable goal of all. The question of limits. There comes a point in every life when the body's limits become more visible than they once were. The knees that once squatted easily now ache. The ankles that once moved freely now feel stiff. The energy that once seemed unlimited now requires careful management. These limits are real, and they deserve respect. But limits are not the same as impossibilities. A knee that cannot squat deeply can still squat shallowly. An ankle that cannot move through full range can still move through partial range. A body that tires easily can still move frequently, in small doses, throughout the day. The limits define the boundaries, but within those boundaries, movement is still possible. The key is to work with limits rather than against them. If standing is difficult, seated movements become the foundation. If balance is poor, supported movements become the norm. If stamina is low, brief movements become the pattern. The principle remains the same. Muscle contraction supports circulation, but the expression adapts to individual circumstances. This adaptability is one of the body's great gifts. It does not require perfection. It does not demand that we meet some external standard of performance. It asks only that we move, in whatever way we can, as often as we can. The movement itself is what matters, not its form or intensity. The social dimension. There is another aspect of movement that deserves consideration, though it is rarely discussed in the context of circulation. Humans are social beings, and movement that occurs in social contexts is often more sustainable than movement that occurs alone. The simple act of walking with another person, of standing together in conversation, of moving through shared space, these social movements carry additional meaning. They are not merely mechanical. They are relational. They connect us to others while also connecting us to our own bodies. For those who live alone, finding social context for movement may require intention. A walking group, a senior center, a regular meeting with a friend. These provide both accountability and companionship. The movement becomes not a chore, but an opportunity. Not a prescription, but a pleasure. Even the movements performed at home can have a social dimension. A spouse who also performs heel lifts. A visitor who joins in ankle pumps. A grandchild who watches and learns. These create small communities of movement, reinforcing the practice through shared experience. The environmental influence. The spaces we inhabit shape our movement patterns in ways we rarely notice. A home with chairs that are too low may discourage rising. A kitchen with counters that are too high may discourage leaning. A bathroom with inadequate support may discourage standing exercises. These environmental factors are not neutral. They either support movement or discourage it. Small adjustments can make significant differences. A sturdy chair placed in a convenient location becomes a support for standing exercises. A footstool kept near the favorite sitting spot makes elevation accessible. Clear pathways through the home encourage walking rather than navigating around obstacles. These are not major renovations, but they change the relationship between the person and their environment. The ideal environment for movement is one that offers frequent, low-friction opportunities. A counter at the right height for support. A chair that is easy to rise from. A path that invites walking. These features do not demand movement, but they make it easier. They reduce the effort required to choose movement over stillness. The long view. There is a way of thinking about health that focuses on the immediate, the next test result, the next symptom, the next intervention. This is natural and understandable. But circulatory health, perhaps more than many aspects of health, rewards a longer view. The veins that return blood from the legs have been working for decades. They will continue working for decades more, if they are supported. The muscles that power the venous pump have been contracting since before birth. They will continue contracting until the end of life. The relationship between these systems is not temporary. It is permanent, ongoing, continuous. What we do today affects this relationship not only today, but tomorrow and next month and next year. Each contraction supports the system. Each period of stillness allows it to weaken. The effects accumulate in both directions. This is not a reason for anxiety, but for perspective. Small choices, repeated consistently, produce significant results over time. The person who understands this does not need to be perfect. They do not need to perform every movement every day. They do not need to worry about occasional lapses. They need only to maintain the general direction, the overall pattern, the consistent tendency toward movement rather than stillness. The body is forgiving. It responds to what we do most of the time, not what we do all of the time. The integration of awareness. There is a final element that connects all the others, and it is perhaps the most subtle. It is awareness, the simple practice of noticing the body, of feeling its signals, of responding to its needs. The person who is aware notices when their legs feel heavy. They notice when swelling begins. They notice when they have been sitting too long. And because they notice, they can respond. They can lift their heels, pump their ankles, rise and move. The awareness creates the opportunity for action. This awareness is not complicated. It does not require meditation or special training. It requires only that we pay attention, that we check in with the body throughout the day, that we notice what is happening before it becomes a problem. The legs speak in quiet voices, a slight heaviness, a mild tightness, a subtle change in sensation. These are not emergencies. They are simply information. And information, when received, allows response. The person who develops this awareness finds that movement becomes more natural, more automatic, more integrated. They do not need to remember to do their exercises because their body reminds them. The heaviness triggers the heel lifts. The tightness triggers the ankle pumps. The awareness and the action become linked, each supporting the other. The quiet conclusion. There is no dramatic conclusion to this understanding of circulation. No moment of revelation that transforms everything. The body does not work that way. It works slowly, steadily, cumulatively. It responds to what we do, day after day, year after year. And it tells us through small signals whether our choices are serving it well. The movements described here, the ankle pumps, the heel lifts, the squats, the elevation, are not breakthroughs. They are not innovations. They are simply ways of activating systems that have always been there, of supporting functions that have always operated, of maintaining what has always been maintained. They are the quiet work of staying alive. For those in the second half of life, this quiet work takes on new significance. The body that has carried us for decades deserves our attention, our care, our consistent support. It does not ask for perfection. It does not demand heroic efforts. It asks only that we move, that we notice, that we respond. It asks that we participate in the ongoing work of circulation, the endless cycle of contraction and relaxation, the steady return of blood to the heart. This is not a prescription, but an invitation to pay attention, to move when movement is possible, to rest when rest is needed, to work with the body rather than against it. The legs will continue their work regardless. The question is whether we will support them in that work, whether we will provide the muscle contractions they need, whether we will remember that circulation is not automatic but participatory. The answer to that question is not found in any single moment. It is found in the accumulation of moments. The small choices made hundreds of times each day. The consistent pattern of movement woven into ordinary life. This is the quiet work. This is the ongoing practice. This is how the body is maintained. Not through dramatic interventions, but through the steady, reliable rhythm of daily attention. And in that rhythm, the legs find their lightness. The swelling recedes. The heaviness lifts. The system operates as it was designed to operate, supported by the muscles that surround it, powered by the contractions that move it, sustained by the awareness that guides it. This is not a cure. It is simply maintenance, the ordinary, essential, valuable work of staying alive. The quiet work of staying alive does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition or reward. It simply continues, day after day, decade after decade, as long as we participate in it. The movements described here are not breakthroughs or innovations. They are simply ways of remembering what the body has always known, of supporting systems that have always supported us, of maintaining what wants to be maintained. And in that maintenance, there is something deeper than health. There is participation in our own existence, a conscious choice to be present in the body that carries us through life. If this reflection has sparked something in you, we would be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments, not as a prescription, but as a conversation among those who are walking this path together. And if you would like to continue exploring the wisdom of healthy aging, we invite you to browse the library and subscribe, so that new reflections find their way to you when they are ready. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.